Marshall Faulk has been booked as our first guest on tomorrow's show to discuss this conversation about running backs.
Great. No sign reveals.
Marshall Faulk, Pro Football Hall of Famer, all-time great, friend of the program, and fantastic Ram as well, which leads me into my next guest. He is the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams. He is Sean McVay, back on the show. How are you, Coach?
I'm doing great, Rich. You know, Marshall Faulk was a part of the interview process. So when they first hired me, it was myself, Marshall Faulk, Stan Kroenke, and Kevin Demoff out to dinner before I was fortunate enough to get this job. So I'm always a big fan of Marshall, because if he didn't sign off on me, I'd probably be still in Washington, maybe.
No kidding. So he was part of the, if you will, Shark Tank that you had to be sitting in front of?
That's exactly right. He, it shows you just the impact and the appreciation that our organization and Mr. Kroenke has for a player of his magnitude, because he's so observant, he's so well thought out. The production speaks for itself. But I think one of the concerns was, how do you hire a guy that's 30 years old to be a head coach and really being able to get his perspective? And fortunately, when we went to the bathroom, I said, hey, I'll split my salary with you if you just sign off on this.
That was what went down in the men's room, huh? That's where you did that. Hey, that's fantastic. Oh my gosh. So now you're a wizened 33-year-old coach right now? 34 going on 74, Rich. You've aged, that's NFL years, right? You've aged 40 years in NFL years. I mean,
that's right.
That is amazing, too, because, I sit here and I think about it. We have discussed it a lot with the Brady signing in Tampa, that 20 years between and how we're like, hey, Brady might have and Belichick might have just not gotten along anymore. I mean, there's so much of that conversation. 20 years of being together is significant. I mean, that would mean that you and Goff would have to be together for another 17 years to match that.
That's right. I mean, it really is. I mean, that's the epitome of the most productive quarterback-coach relationship that's occurred. I mean, it really is unprecedented for the level of consistency. I mean, that they've been able to achieve. I just you continue to come away impressed, and you can't help but just, sit there and say, hey, touche.
Let's get into some nuts and bolts here. Speaking of unprecedented, of what's going on in the world, Sean McVay of the Los Angeles Rams here on the Rich Eisen Show. So are you working from home? Walk me through what your day is with the draft less than 3 weeks away, Sean.
Yeah, so it's been, it certainly is unprecedented. I think really, guys that have been instrumental in being able to allow us to operate as close to the normal as possible has been, our IT director, Jeff Graves, our video coordinator, Dan Demetrison, and his groups. I'm becoming an expert on these Zoom meetings or Microsoft Teams meetings, but typically what I'm doing is you get up, you kind of, get a little workout in, and then you immediately dive into either meetings with the coaches to kind of stay on track with your installs, or you're having draft meetings, which we've kind of started up this week. And, you just kind of just chip away and try to stay busy, try to create a rhythm and a routine. And, that's really what every day entails now, just based on how we're forced to operate.
And what about today would have been the day, obviously, if the world was normal, that your off-season workout program would have opened up. What do you know about the rules right now about when you can figure out what that looks like virtually, Coach?
Yeah, we're kind of waiting to find that out, Rich. Like the new staffs, like you mentioned, they would have had the opportunity to start up today. And I think we're waiting on clarity from the league just to see, all right, what level of interaction will they allow based on kind of the agreement between the league and the PA as far as trying to get these guys, their workout bonuses, but being able to follow the protocols to be a part of the solution with the coronavirus. So we're kind of waiting. I think all the staffs, and I've kind of talked to some guys around the league, you just set it up to where you're ready to have virtual meetings and figure out the best way to interact with your guys from afar. But we really haven't gotten exactly what that looks like. But I would imagine if we do end up agreeing on some level of communication, you'll be forced to use the resources that we've kind of been utilizing with our interaction amongst our coaching staff and personnel with these draft meetings. And I think it'll be something that we'll just take advantage of and adjust and adapt like you have to in these times.
So technically, are you able football legally to have contact with Goff now and just go through stuff with him, or like what does that look like?
Not right now. It's in that involuntary period. So right now we aren't able to do that quite yet, Rich. And really we actually are waiting on some clarity as the league is working through figuring out the specific ramifications on, all right, where are we going to exactly have the draft? What are all 32 teams going to do so we can operate on a fair playing field, but also be mindful of all the things that are going on that are a lot bigger than football in our world.
Yes.
And then I think the next kind of thing to check off or to try to be able to address is what are we going to allow specific to the offseason program, given the fact that, like you mentioned, those new coaching staffs would have opened up their offseason programs today or had the ability to do so.
Well, and Sean McVay here on the Rich Eisen Show, the governor of the state of California issued a shelter-in-place weeks ago, and the mayor of Los Angeles did the same right around the same time. So the Rams are not allowed to be in the Thousand Oaks facility right now. I mean, can you walk me through all of that, Coach?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we haven't been there. Like I said, we've been just working remotely. There's been some specific alterations that they've enabled based on guys that need that rehab if they were injured. But for the most part, our facilities are closed. We're following exactly what Governor Newsom and Mayor Garcetti have asked to be a part of the solution, and I think it's really important that we follow those things and demonstrate the urgency and the importance of staying in your home and trying to get that that curve on the downward trend like you hear everybody talk about day in and day out.
Right, and Peter King was on in hour number one, Sean. He had a photograph of Andy Reid in his office, his home office, his basement office. Andy had what looked like a Stairmaster, an elliptical in there, and a desk shoved up against a door that we have no idea what's on the other side of it. What does yours look like, Sean? What does yours look like?
I feel really, really lucky. I've got a good office in my house that's kind of set aside where it's kind of where I duck away and I'm able to access my film and do all the things. It's similar to Coach Reid's setup, but it's in an actual office. And I did see that picture that Peter had from last week. And, even though I don't have as much swag as Big Red, I'll try to get a similar office.
Well, do you think, because it's interesting, Sean, that there was a towel placed on the workout machine as if it had just freshly been used. Do you think that that's staged? What do you think? What do you think, Coach? Let's get into it.
He doesn't have to fake anything. If he had a towel on there, he was using that thing. I bet you he was going to town, and now he was ready to watch some film. I think I saw some Chiefs film up there. He wasn't doing the draft stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and there's no snacks there too. I mean, he's just locked in. He's literally locked in doing his work right there. Oh man, me too. Sean McVay here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, let's get into some of the maneuvers that were made over the last couple of weeks. What happened with the Rams and Todd Gurley that you guys figured it was time to part ways, Coach?
Yeah, I think, the first thing that you talk about, Rich, when I reflect back on it, and especially this time, because you have a little bit more time than usually is allocated to really go back. And with some of the new coaches we have, you're really diving into the last 3 years of film we've had. And, I think the first thing that I would say is, it's really just unbelievable what he's done over the 5 years that he was a Ram. I couldn't be more appreciative of our time together, and I do think that eventually we'll be able to look back and really be able to cherish a lot of the great memories that we've shared. He has been so important in the success we've had as a team, and I owe a lot of that to him, and I'm forever grateful for having worked with him. And sometimes, tough decisions have to be made. I think that he will do a very nice job with the Falcons, but, for us, the only way I can really put it, Rich, is these decisions are never easy, but more than anything, I think it's important to just represent the type of player, the person, and the appreciation for the time that we did have together. And, that's really kind of what I would want to emphasize, just because of what he's meant to me and what he's meant to us in the 3 years that we've spent together.
And I mean, in terms of what he's meant, you want to talk about a player who's connected into the fan. He has that ability when he scores to get the fans out of their seats, maybe more so than anybody else. It's just something that was about him, or still is, electrifying. But I'm going to go there with you, and the there is something I've gone there with you before. Is this an injury thing? Is he the same player, Coach? I mean, it just seems to be a question that's always been lingering about Todd Gurley. Sean?
Yeah, I would just say this. You said it right. I mean, when you look at the amount of touchdowns he's been able to score, you talk about the feel he has in the red zone. It is electric. It is dynamic. He's a superstar, and he's earned that status just based on the charisma, the production on the field. I think one of the things that I'll always appreciate, Rich, that says as much about him as anything is you talk about how guys handle some tough situations are different than what you would anticipate. I think one of the coolest reflections of Todd, I think about that NFC Championship and the way that he handled himself after that, where he's been, first-team All-Pro back. Things didn't go that way necessarily for him personally in that game, but when you hear how he speaks about his teammates and those kind of things, that's what's been right about the Rams the last couple of years are guys that been instrumental in the culture. And there's a lot of things that go into tough decisions, Rich. And what I could say is I just wish him the best in Atlanta. I think they got a good football player. But we're also excited about seeing is there an opportunity to maybe add somebody in the draft. We ended up taking Darrell Henderson in the third round last year that we think has a lot of upside. And when Malcolm Brown's gotten his opportunities, he's delivered in a big way. In the last few years, and I think adding Thomas Brown as our running back coach, I think this guy's a great football coach. He's had a history of really developing a lot of big time backs at the collegiate level that have really transitioned into the pro game nicely, and I'm really excited about watching him lead that group, and we'll see if we end up adding one in the draft.
Okay, so that is, you think, a position to potentially upgrade post Gurley?
I think there's a lot of guys with the depth of this draft. There's a lot of different directions that we could go. Certainly want to be mindful of the draft capital we have right now, but that is a position that we'll look closely at, and whether we end up pulling the trigger and being able to get one of those guys off the board, I think will remain to be seen just based on how things fall, especially when where we pick and the value that we place on those players with how the draft meetings and all that go.
Okay, Sean McVay here on the Rich Eisen Show. Look, you've got your guy in golf, so I'm going to ask you to evaluate some of these quarterbacks, and this is not going to be in any way, shape, or form viewed how you view your guy, because you got your guy. Mm-hmm. But
there you go.
Your coach, your former assistant, who's now the coach in Cincinnati, might get Burrow. The question is how do you think Burrow fits into an offense that Zach Taylor's running? What do you think?
Yeah, I think what makes Zach a good coach, Rich, is he'll adjust and adapt to Joe's skill set if that's the direction they decide to go. Just watching LSU's film, I couldn't have been more impressed with just the poise, the anticipation. I think one of the things that really set, Burrow apart is in a lot of games, they did a great job of spreading people out, and he's recognizing and making quick decisions and giving guys an opportunity to run after the catch. But I was really impressed when you look at the Oklahoma, the Clemson game, even in some of the early parts of the Georgia game in the SEC championship, just his ability to escape, when there is a rush, keeping your eyes down the field, be able to deliver balls, that give guys an opportunity to make plays down the field, recognizing if guys mess up a coverage, when he finds Moss on the touchdown against Oklahoma down the left sideline, guys get out of position, he makes you pay. And I think he's got great wide field vision, and I think the athleticism is something that can sometimes be underrated because of the production he had just operating out of the pocket. But when he did escape, his eyes are down the field, and he's able to be a point guard and distribute the ball. And I thought they did a great job, and you see why they were one of the most prolific offenses in the history of college football.
And which other QBs might you have just seen or seen film on, I guess not named Tua and Herbert, because we know those are guys at the top of the draft, that have maybe leapt off and you think this guy has an ability to play in the National Football League? Sean?
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it, Rich, because of how good we feel about Jared. I haven't spent, a whole lot of time, really, with the quarterback evaluation other than when you're kind of just watching some of the players and you see some crossover where you might be studying a player and then you see that quarterback just continue to show up, whether you're studying defensive players or whether you're studying a teammate on offense. But Certainly when you see what, you mentioned Tua, you mentioned Herbert, but I think Love's a guy that has some upside. He has some skills and traits that certainly excite you. Just the athleticism to be able to throw off some different platforms. The ball jumps off his hand when you just see him in a couple clips here and there, but I don't think I've really done, quite enough due diligence and background work on the quarterback position as a whole. I just happen to have seen a lot of Burrow's stuff because, we've looked at some different players, and then I was interested in just checking out their offense.
So then what do you got for me on the deepest position in this draft, do you think, Sean, from what you've seen?
I think everybody's made a point about the receiver position being really deep. I can't think of the amount of really quality players that have some different skill sets that they bring to the table. But I think when it's always helpful for me, Rich, to say, all right, who is this guy a comparison to in the league that's had success?
Right.
And I think you're seeing a lot of guys at the top of the draft, specific to this wideout class, that could go. I think you'll see a lot of guys go in those first 100 picks at the receiver position that all have a lot of things that excite you, that intrigue you. And I think you're seeing different molds of types of players that can infect and influence the game from that receiver position based on how they've been used and how it translates to the NFL.
It's amazing. I just seeing the kids up close and personal at the combine. I mean, those receivers were just eye-popping, and they're all big. So many of them, not all of them, obviously, but they're physical, they're big, and they can do so much. And it's amazing how we've seen. You just saw in your own division, obviously last year, DK Metcalf coming off of the campus and balling out. It really is amazing, these receivers, Sean, for sure.
It really is. Yeah, not to mention DeAndre Hopkins coming into the division as well. So that'll be fun as well.
Good use of fun. Before I let you go, Sean, you and I know a lot of the same people. I got some intel on the show that you are binge watching when you are not watching film and preparing for the draft. Do you want to cough it up, or do you want me to say the words? What do you got for me? How do you want to handle this one?
Go ahead and tell me. This could go a couple different directions. I'll let you expose me before I double expose myself.
Love is Blind. I'm hearing you're watching Love is Blind on Netflix. Is that a true story?
You know what? You tell Kevin Demoff that he came in one time to give me the new logo hat, and he caught me at a moment of weakness.
I don't want to confirm or deny that you've outed my source, Coach, but that is not the show you are binge watching. You are not binge watching.
I saw a couple episodes of that. I must admit, I thought you were going to talk about the Tiger King.
Okay, so you are watching. You're locked into the Tiger King. You're locked into that too.
I have seen it. It was. It was one of those deals that I'm saying to myself as I'm watching it, I can't believe I'm watching it, and I can't stop, and I just can't believe it, but I'm just watching it, and I'm doing it.
So did you watch all of them? Are you locked into all of them, or?
I have. It's so bad. I saw some link that I guess there's an extra episode coming out, and I'll probably embarrassingly tune into that one.
No, it's okay. Sean, it's just most of the country's doing it, but it's interesting that Love is Blind, Chris, in case you're wondering.
I've heard of this show. I haven't seen it yet.
Singles try to find a match and fall in love without ever seeing each other face to face. It's interesting, Coach. That might be the way you draft a player this year, don't you think?
That is a good way of putting it, but like anything else, if you've watched the show, Rich, as soon as they actually get revealed to one another, I can immediately see the brain churning whether this was a good decision or not.
Well, I hope that isn't the case for your draft with you and Les Snead, that Love will be some.
No, you know what? The good thing is what you do really rely on in this time, Rich, is the background that your scouts and personnel groups have done really over the last year, because their evaluation starts years in advance. They have a great way of vetting a lot of these players, and whether it be the Senior Bowl, the Combine, there's been a lot of interaction that we might not be exposed to with the pro days and some of the things that the coaches have, but that's where the trust comes in, and do feel really good about the work that those guys have done.
Thanks for the time, Sean. You're the man. Really appreciate catching up with you like this, and let's do it again soon. Let's chat soon.
That sounds great. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Right back at you. That's Sean McVay, head coach of the Los Angeles Rams.